Okay, so what I want to talk to you right now is we have discussed a number of literary devices. We've seen them in To Kill a Mockingbird, but we haven't really gone into any of them in any kind of great depth. So some of these are ones that you should have known from previous years of school. Others are maybe new to you, but we want to start to have this working dialogue so that when we do the analytical stuff that we're going to do with our short stories and with Romeo and Juliet and with poetry, you really have the language that you need in order to explain the devices that these authors are using, so we can look at how these different devices are employed in order to create a certain effect. So here we go. The first one up is theme. The theme is the central meaning or dominant idea in a literary work. So we have obviously talked about the fact that in Royals, the song by Lorde, and in Fight with Tools, the song by the Flowbots, in both of those, the central theme is this question of poor versus rich, and the idea that being poor isn't necessarily bad and being rich isn't necessarily good. Those are themes. The theme in To Kill a Mockingbird was, one of them was that you shouldn't judge people based on how they look or without knowing things about them. So that's theme. Diction. Diction we've talked about a fair amount. The technical definition is a writer's choice of words. That's pretty much what we've said. Phrases, sentence structures, and figurative language which combine to help create meaning. So the author's word choice and phrasing are both things that are used in order to create the meaning that they're trying to convey in the works that they've written. So that's diction. Tone. We've talked about this one. The author's attitude toward the subject. The author's attitude toward the subject. We talked about that in terms of mood and atmosphere, which we'll get into in more detail on a later date. Repetition is exactly what it sounds like. It's the author's repeated use of a word or a phrase throughout a literary work for emphasis. It could be a longer passage, like the chorus of Fight with Tools. It could be a recurring refrain, like Atticus telling people to walk around in other people's shoes or to climb inside other people's skin. Both of those are repeated throughout the novel. And it could be one repeated word over and over again that an author uses in order to emphasize a particular point. A symbol. Hopefully you know this. We talked about the diamond at the beginning of Royals being a symbol of wealth and money. Gold being a symbol of wealth and money. It's a person, object, image, or word that evokes meaning beyond the literal significance. So when I talk about a white dove is just a bird, but a white dove is a symbol for peace. When I talk about a red rose is just a flower, but a red rose is also a conventional symbol for love. So that is a symbol. Alliteration. This is really more of a poetic term, but we've seen it a little bit in the stuff we just took a look at. It's the repetition of the same consonant sounds in a sequence of words. Fight with our hearts and our hopes and our hands. Hearts, hopes, hands, all beginning with an H. That is alliteration. Draws attention to the thing that you're talking about. Next up is characterization. This is the one that we should know the best already. It is the process by which a writer makes a character seem real to the reader. It can be physical description. It can be actions that they do. It can be things that they say. It can be beliefs that they have or thoughts that they reveal to us. Whatever it happens to be, it's the things, when you put them all together, that make the character seem real to you. That is characterization. Antagonist. We talked about this with the Destructors and how you can't really go by the old definition of good guy, bad guy, because that's oversimplified. The antagonist is the character, force, or collection of forces in fiction or drama that opposes the protagonist and gives rise to the conflict of the story. So we'll get to protagonist in a minute. The protagonist is basically the main character, the one that we empathize or sympathize with and relate to. And the antagonist is the one that works in opposition to the protagonist, creating conflict. Exposition. We've talked about how in To Kill a Mockingbird it starts off kind of slowly because there's a lot of exposition. Background information about the characters and their circumstances in the setting. The beginning of To Kill a Mockingbird introduces us to Scout, introduces us to Maycomb, introduces us to the mystery of Boo Radley. There's a lot of expository stuff before you get to the more interesting chapters around chapter 4. Irony. Irony is when the opposite of what you expect to happen happens. I gave the example of I'm an English teacher. If you find out that I hate reading books, instead I like watching Real Housewives of New Jersey, which I don't, that would be ironic. You would think an English teacher would like reading books. If a character you would expect to behave a certain way suddenly behaves a different way, does the opposite of what you would expect, that is irony, specifically situational irony. Later on in the year we'll get to dramatic irony and verbal irony. Protagonist. This was the opposite of the antagonist. It's the main character of a narrative. It's the central character who engages the reader's interest and empathy. T engages our interest, but T is not a good guy. He tears down old Misery's house that's messed up and wrong and not nice, which would make him seem like he's antagonizing Mr. Thomas, but instead he is actually the protagonist of the story because he's the central character who engages the reader's interest. Setting. Just make sure that you understand it is not just the physical place, but it is also the social context in which the action of the story occurs. So for the fact that To Kill a Mockingbird takes place in the racist South in the time of the Depression, the social context, the Depression, has a lot to do with Walter Cunningham, has a lot to do with the story of Tom Robinson. So the setting is not just the physical place, it is also the political and social ideals of the time. That's setting. And I think, let me see here, I think that's going to wrap us up. Let's see if I've gotten through all of them. Theme, diction, tone, repetition, symbol, alliteration, characterization, antagonist, exposition, irony, protagonist, and setting. So there's your first 12, ladies and gentlemen. There they are. And for those of you keeping up, this is an app worth checking out. It is Flashcards. It's a very handy app. It looks like this, and it lets you make your own flashcards. You see, my wife and I are studying Italian. There's my Italian flashcards and our literary devices. The cool thing is, once I go into it and I start working on the deck, I can make piles of the ones I know. Theme. Oh, that's like the main idea of the story. Check. And the ones I don't know, diction, what's that one? Oh no, I don't remember. And then after I go through the pile and I check off the ones I know, and I don't check off the ones I don't know, then I can go back in and I have 2 piles of the ones that I know and the ones that I don't know. See, learned, those are the ones I know. 2 learned, I can go back and do just those. It's a very handy app for studying any vocabulary type thing, whether it's in my class or someone else's. So, that concludes the video for today. Make sure that you have all the details of those notes. If you need to go back and watch the video again to make sure you have time to write these down in your notes, do so. I can quiz you on this at any time from this point forward. Bye.